Hello, welcome again to another episode of Waves, a podcast out of King of Kings Church in Omaha. Waves is all about what's happening at the intersection of the waves of this world and our faith in Jesus. My name is John Bartels. I'm the host for Waves, and today I'm sitting down with Dr. Brenda Nyans, who is one of our wonderful counselors at the core at King of Kings, and she has a parent seminar coming up where the topic is raising children in today's technology-heavy world. We are going to talk about that as well as what this world of technology means for adults today as couples, spouses, and individuals. Because this conversation went a bit longer than most of our podcasts, this episode will have the first half, and the next episode next week will continue into the second half of this conversation. So welcome again to Waves. Here's Brenda Nyans, and here we go. Brenda, thank you so much for being on the Waves podcast today. It's so great to have you.
My pleasure to be here.
So, Brenda, before we get started in talking about technology and children today, I would love to hear your story about how you became a counselor and just God's path for you in that direction.
Absolutely. I've had somewhat of a crazy journey. When I tell people about my professional journey, I feel like I've been alive for about 150 years because I've had so many twists and turns. I started out professionally, in the broadcasting field. So interesting that I'm sitting here on a podcast. I love that. It feels a little full circle for me. And so I started in that career. And one of the highlights that probably most interesting little tidbit in my life is I was an intern with the Denver Broncos. And so people, as they get to know me, they're like...
So you like football, huh?
I do like football, yes. And so that was one of my little kind of claim to fame, weird little moments along the way. And I did really enjoy it. And my personality is I throw my heart and soul into everything. So I passionately did that for a while. And then I realized this isn't feeling like I'm using all my skills. And probably the most important skills, my empathy, my developer. I've always sort of known I was supposed to be a counselor. And so fairly quickly, I didn't stay in the field very long, I started my journey towards becoming a counselor. And so the first step for me was my other undergrad degree is nursing. Fell in love with psychiatric nursing. I was that girl who, after they call it our clinicals, when we go and we help our patients that are assigned to us, everybody else is talking about all the cool procedures they got to do. I'm showing up telling them the whole life story of my client. I was truly that different girl. There was something is not the same here.
Yeah.
And that's when I knew that I'm close to my profession, but there's a little bit more to it. So from the launch of basically psychiatric nursing, which I loved, I did some home health nursing, which I absolutely adored. And guess what? I found out the whole life story of all my clients, their family, their neighbors, and everybody on the block.
Yeah.
That was what I was wired to do. And so I pretty much went into counseling at that point. And that was my sweet spot. That's where I got to use my God-given empathy, which I tell people it's not what you're saying, it's what you're not saying. I can read all of that, which can make some people uncomfortable at first, and I understand that. And so I started down that journey, and I did some pretty intense clinical work. I started out psychiatric inpatient, working with adolescents. I did my provisional work at a place called Utah Holly, which is no longer open here in Omaha, but very similar to Boys Town, if you've never heard of it. And so I just was progressively moving along in my field. And at that time, I had no idea that being a counselor at church would even be a thing. Because at that time, it wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
And so I was just praying about that. I'm like, Lord, I want to talk more about faith. Because if there's no Jesus, I'm putting Band-Aids on problems, maybe. But those Band-Aids are getting ripped off right away. Without Jesus, I'm not helping. That's how I felt at the time. So I just prayed about it. I'm like, Lord, is there a way that counseling can be a ministry? And lo and behold, because that's the way our wonderful Father works, about 6 months into me praying that consistently, I met with Pastor Leroy Gerner here at King of Kings Church on a side ministry that I was doing. And it was so amazing because a couple minutes in, and Pastor Leroy loves to share the story, he asked me, am I happy about where I'm working? And I was just blown away. I was like, wow, this is how you're going to answer that prayer, Lord. And make a long story short, I came on board at King of Kings 15 years ago and was able then to fully use the gifts that the Lord has given me and have felt like this is why, for this time in this place, this generation, this is why God has me here now, to get to do Christian counseling and then to do something I'm very passionate about, which is to train and raise up new leaders, which I love to do and have the opportunity to do. It is a big part of my job. I have undergrad interns, I have grad interns, I have provisional counselors, I have spiritual formation interns, and I love it. So yeah, that's how I got to this place today.
Yeah, I love what you said about training new leaders. So often I think, especially younger leaders, we think that our leadership is all about how much we can get done,
Right.
when that emotional and that mental aspect of what we're doing is incredibly important. That often gets tossed to the side.
Absolutely. One of the first things I teach new leaders, and these are leaders regardless of what their background is, age, I get the gamut, I love it, is do you know what stuff from your past is going to probably show up in your ministry? And truth be told, not a lot of, in leaders of all ages, but certainly my younger leaders, that's really eye-opening to them. And I love to help them. And they say, well, I think I got over that years ago. I'm like, I understand what you're saying because God does heal, but God is also always healing. And you need to know where that can come back up and bite you.
So let me drop some truth bomb on you right now.
Exactly. That's exactly correct. And so that's probably one of the biggest areas I train new leaders in, is I tell them, I said, every one of us will always have areas that we need more healing in. And if we're not aware of that, if we don't stay on that journey, then people are going to show up in our lives and we're going to be like, oh my gosh, I just met me, because they come in with the same stuff we're trying to work through. And if we're not aware of what those things are, we can be blindsided by those. And I think that's actually one of the areas that causes people to burn out in ministry, because they just run into that and they're blindsided by it and they don't know what happened when they don't realize that some of their past is kind of showing up again.
Yeah, it's that crossroads of we are a new creation in Christ, but God is also recreating all the time.
Yes. Yeah, that we have been healed, we are being healed, and we have more healing to come.
Amen.
And that's always the case every day of our lives. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So I want to go into your parent seminar coming up. And
Yes.
the topic is on technology and our children, and kind of, rather than me explaining, why don't you take it away?
Oh, I would love to. Yes, we're doing a 4-part seminar targeted for parents, but it's open to everybody. It's a free event.
Awesome.
It's open to the community. I think anybody who feels like they're still struggling with trying to figure out where screens and social media and just technology fits in their life, if they're concerned that they're overusing it or misusing it, I think you would have a place at this seminar. But absolutely, our main target is for parents, showing kiddos where this fits. The simplest way I say it to people is this: screens and social media and technology are meant to enhance our life, not replace. And that, to me, is the line that I kind of help people draw. Meaning, relationships should not be online exclusively. And if your main entertainment is gaming and all the other cool things that happen on technology, you're missing out on some key developmental areas. And so I always say to people, I'm not one of those that's going to tell you, hey, these are the strict limits you should place on yourself, because that's not a measure of maturity. Maturity means self-regulation, where we learn with each age at appropriate level what makes the most sense for us.
Yeah.
And that target is always moving, but the key in that is to just not let it take over and rob us of the important areas of our life, especially the relational parts of our life.
Yeah. So we've had some recent news come up lately where the video game Fortnite, which is played by billions of people,
Yes.
shut itself down.
Yes.
And the world's seeing impact on it. And I know, Brenda, you came to me and talked to me about it the other day, just how big of a deal it is for so many families
Yes.
where their kids are addicted to this game.
Right.
And so what kind of effects are we seeing with this major video game suddenly shutting itself down on the kids, who are playing it?
Oh my gosh, the effect. First of all, I know Fortnite did not do this on purpose because they never called me and asked me for the timing on this, but the timing could not have been perfect. More perfect going into the seminar. I'm just going to say that.
Absolutely.
Because it makes the point that we were trying to make at the seminar. So it came to my attention, I don't know, probably through Twitter, I think it was, on Sunday, that Fortnite was down. And I'm not a Fortnite player. I'll just say that right up front. And I don't know any players firsthand. But all of a sudden, it's just blowing up on social media.
Yeah.
It's trending everywhere. It's the top trending Fortnite blackout, or black hole, excuse me. And so I was looking at that, and I'm like, what's going on? And quickly, this part I feel is accurate. There's a lot of information still out there that I'm unclear on. But it sounds like what the game did was they took the game into what they call a black hole. And they show the screen, and literally the screen looks like this black hole.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure how long the game is going to be down. I believe it's still down today. But they're going to bring it back up as they launch the next part of this game. So right away, I was fascinated. And so I can't even help myself. I'm like, okay, how were people reacting to this?
Yeah.
And so quickly, readily, easily, because the news is all over this, social media is all over this, there's videos everywhere of people kind of just shut down. Little kids crying, little kids throwing fits. I saw some video of adults throwing their computer across the room.
Yeah.
And a clear indication of what we know about not just this game, but some of the games. The addiction level is so super high on these games that basically it's taking somebody addicted and you've just shut them off. I've done some, that's just kind of my nerdy part of myself. I love to study areas of the brain and effects of things on the brain. It's just kind of this weird side thing I do. And I'm fascinated because they've done studies on some of these games, the more highly addictive games, and they can do brain scans. It's amazing how science has got us to that point. I love that God gave us this provision called science. And they can do studies on the brain, and the brain scans look the same for some of these gamers as somebody who has been on some pretty serious drugs for many, many years. The brains look the same. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's really alarming, especially because these are little kiddo brains we're talking about. Mm-hmm. It's alarming for any brain, but that really catches my attention.
Especially developing brains. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes. The brain doesn't even fully develop for men. It's 25. For gals, it's 23. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot that should be going on for that brain and not having it stuck in this very addictive pattern where they're missing out on some developmental skills that they should be working on. Yes.
Yeah, I was just reading a ABC article on the Fortnite shutdown. And one of the fathers said about his son, it's like he's figuring out it's just a game.
Right? Yes.
Like it became such a large part of his world.
Yes.
And I can go back to when I was a kid. When I was in junior high, I played video games all the time.
Yes.
And I loved them. And but I look back and say, well, I could have been outside a little bit more, probably.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's the balance of it. And I was, giving my age away a little bit here. I'm from the pre-gaming, like my first games were Frogger. Yes, I just aged myself by saying that. But I know how the brain of a kiddo works. And for me, I was such a swimmer as a kid. I was like this little minnow. But I know it was the same thing for my parents. If that pool closed, which once in a while it did for maintenance or for a variety of reasons, My parents had to put up with me for that day. They had a little swimming addict that they had to deal with. And so I know how that part of the brain works. And it's always been the same. It's just that now parents have to deal with something that the previous generations did not have to deal with, which is especially these games. I'm going to kind of pick on the games for a minute, that were designed to hit that pleasure part of the brain.
Yeah.
And to just keep it, and I won't go real technical, but it's amazing because how the brain is wired is the seeking, meaning looking for something, seeking out pleasure part of the brain, and the reward part of the brain are intertwined. And so think of a game, I'll just use Fortnite since we're talking about it. It's built in with all of these wonderful little, oh gosh, I don't know what they use in that game, but like these little built-in rewards. Like you've just leveled up, you've just done different things, and then these little trinkets and things just pop up all over the place. And there again, apologies to real Fortnite players, and I'm probably like, oh, we know the name of it, and she's not using the correct name, but be that as it may, but it's built right into the game of keep playing, keep playing, keep playing. And in the brain, what's happening, and we know what it's called dopamine. There's this chemical that's being released in the brain. And gaming and social media release huge amounts of dopamine. Huge amounts. It's highly addictive. And so I'll move away from the gaming for a minute, but like in social media, it's huge. So if you think of, I'll just use Facebook as an example for this, because it has that quick, easy little like button. You post something on Facebook, and here comes the addictive part of it. You don't know how many people are going to like it. There's the seeking part of the brain activated. If you knew, the brain would become dull to the activity, but I wonder how many people. And if I posted something and you posted something, John, I could do this too. I could be, wow, my picture of this event got 20 likes. John got 50 likes. So I keep going back and I look. And what do I need to do to make my picture look better next time so I get that many likes? And the whole time my brain is going, yeah, do that, do that, do that. Because I keep tapping that dopamine in my brain when I do that.
Yeah. I remember Mike White and I were talking about kind of this topic. I think it was on the very first episode of this podcast. And we just talking about how when you've developed a reward system in social media like that, you start tailoring your identity to what is working and what isn't working for you. And how in a real/fake world of social media,
right,
especially on developing minds, that self-identity can become skewed.
Absolutely. I will show you the parts of myself I want you to see.
Exactly.
And not the other parts. And one of the, I find one of the more challenging parts, and there again, I am a fan of social media, gaming screens, and all of that, as long as they're kind of kept in their place. One of the areas that I love to touch on when I teach on this topic, and we'll definitely be hitting this at the seminars, is what we call instant versus delayed gratification. And delayed gratification, who wants to hear that word?
I don't. Raise
my hand. I start with myself. The word doesn't even sound good.
Yeah.
Before we even dig into what it means, delayed gratification. I mean, the word should be said like that, right? But what happens in this whole world of technology, this digital age, social media screens and all of that, everything is instant gratification. Everything you want is right there. And if you don't like it, just move on to a different platform, reboot, move on. There is no need to wait. And the whole delayed gratification gets hit hard. The benefits of delayed gratification: impulse control. Yes, we need that. Appreciation, prioritization, and sustained focus. And so if we're spending a lot of time in the digital technology world, nothing wrong with that. But it just means we need to intentionally make sure we have and develop that ability to have delayed gratification, which is the goal-setting part of us, living with purpose, having things of interest that are outside of the digital world. And that's one of the areas we're starting to see a huge effect of not having an ability to wait. And the big area, I think, is this for kiddos is if I said to you, John, hey, here's this great cup of coffee if you love coffee, and you can have this, or if you're willing to wait, I'll give you a Starbucks card if Starbucks happens to be your favorite. Can you wait? And we're finding, studies are starting to find that for kiddos who are overusing this, and teenagers and even adults, they're going to jump on that first cup of coffee really fast, because the idea of waiting for something, are you kidding me? I'll take what I can have now.
Oh yeah, and plus you add in caffeine addiction in people.
Right, I know. I'm glad you caught that. Yes, I couldn't even resist. I'm like, I just crossed my addictions here, right? But that's what's happening, and that's what we're seeing, and that's kind of the danger on it. The other one that I think is really something that we need to watch for super closely is how relationships are done. Yeah. I think of how many times I've been hearing from family members, friends, people coming through the ministry that working through conflict resolution and sustaining relationships has become more challenging. And it's always been a challenge because
we're sinful people.
Yeah, right. And why wouldn't you just want to be with the people at that moment who you feel like you're getting along with the best, and you ditch the other people and then just kind of keep adding and subtracting people, because that would be really easy to do. And for many, and there again, due to our sinful nature, that would be the really comfortable thing to do. And what we're finding with social media is you can block, you can mute.
Yeah.
You don't even have to tell people that you've blocked them, because isn't that the thing that comes up on all the platforms?
Yeah.
We're not going to tell so-and-so you blocked them. We're not going to tell so-and-so you muted them. And we're starting to see that spill over. Now, I'll talk into my counseling practice a little bit on behalf of the counselors here at the Core. We're seeing that more and more, the sustainability of relationships, and perhaps more so even in our younger clients. I'm starting to see the impact of that.
Yeah.
Why should I work at this relationship when clearly we have some disagreements or we don't see eye to eye on something? And I can't help but to think that to some degree, and I question and I kind of find out a little bit about their online habits before I jump to this conclusion, but I'm seeing a direct connection. And I'm hearing language that I think is coming from the online world, which is, I cut so-and-so out of my life. I dropped so-and-so. And these were relationships that the person had for quite a few years. Mm-hmm. Then all of a sudden we don't see eye to eye on this, or I think my life's going a little bit different direction, and they drop them. Mm-hmm. And I think that is happening to some degree more so because of what's happening online.
I bet that's true. I was listening to a podcast. Can't even remember what podcast it was, but whoever was hosting the podcast, they mentioned that the number one thing to look for into someone who is transitioning out of adolescence into into adulthood is their ability to invest in something and wait for it to mature, whether that's a relationship, whether that's a business, whether that's a job. To have that delayed gratification, where you can see something grow into something greater, brings about purpose and brings about maturity.
Absolutely. And that's where the delayed gratification that goes into one of my other words I love to use that is not a fun, wonderful, exciting word, but it's an important one, is resiliency, because that's what we're talking about, is an ability to make solid decisions, work towards something, think about character, think about keeping your word, think about how you're even viewed in the real world and not just the online world. And all of that plays into resiliency. And where an overuse or actually a misuse of social media screens, all of that can be, is it can make people very reactionary and not what we call responsive. Reactionary is this. You posted something, John. I have a choice on most platforms. I can like it, love it, hate it. I've noticed some of the platforms add a few other quick reactions, but when they first came out, there was like two or three things. There's not nuance in that. There's not dialogue in that. I don't really have to think through. consider really how I view that topic. I can just say, like it or love it, move on. It doesn't cause me to have to use much critical thinking. It doesn't create within me a need to even figure out why I have strong reactions or not strong reactions or positive or negative reactions. Now, on something as simple as, hey, you posted a movie and I liked it or I didn't, who cares? It doesn't matter. But if we get too caught up in doing that and that becomes a pretty ingrained habit, that's where it becomes problematic, because we're not creating a environment or a society where we can have deep dialogue on topics, because depth is not really happening on social media.
Yeah.
Right? And if it does, usually it's toxic depth, where it's mudslinging and it goes pretty cruel and pretty mean pretty quickly.
I liked how you touched on that topic of resiliency. And I think when I think about social media, I think so often it becomes an escape from developing that resiliency, where rather than sitting down and saying, okay, I've got to deal with this situation, I've got to deal with my feelings, I'm going to go and blab about it on Twitter, or, connect with someone I don't know and complain about this issue,
right,
rather than actually, internalizing it in a healthy way and dealing with it, with my family or with my friends, at a restaurant or something like that. I can just get it off my mind, send it out there.
Yes.
And I don't really have to be as resilient to it, because I've kind of just already released it in an unhealthy way.
Yeah, exactly. When I was in mostly probably end of grade school and into middle school, I noticed how, and I probably wasn't a big part of what I'm about to describe just because of my higher empathy, but that's probably the only reason I stayed out of it. What we call all of our little girl triangulation, girl fighting. And what you're talking about.
You're going to have to explain that.
Yes,
to me.
Exactly. I'm about to, right? Okay, guys, bear with me on this. Girls already know what I'm talking about as I go here. We, for young gals, we tend to do this. If I'm upset with somebody, I like to make it a team sport. Meaning, and there again,
I'm laughing. I'm sorry.
You should, because it's ridiculous. But I know the gals out there know exactly what I'm talking about. So if I'm going to be upset with somebody, why would I just be upset with them by myself? I should go get 2 or 3 people, and we can all be upset with her at the same time. That's why it's called girl drama. I've just explained what girl drama is. And so you can pick a little fight, and that fight can take 6 months to run its course, because you have factions within factions and all this little moving energy, especially in these young developing minds that are trying to figure out all this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So I even look at social media. I'm like, oh my gosh, that behavior can continue, because you just did a beautiful job of describing that, John. And I think the guys are doing this too. You can throw out something and just sit back and watch and see how many people are going to agree with you.
Yeah.
People that don't even know the whole story, they only know your side of something, are now going to pile on to this topic.
It's an inauthentic support system.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. It's going to shift when there's something more interesting to talk about, right? So yes, it's going to be yes, but you're going to get to trend for a minute. And that's what we're seeing, because that is an immature behavior that we're supposed to grow out of. And unfortunately, what can happen, especially on social media, is that behavior can continue. And what we see as well that I think is unfortunate that can happen very easily on social media is almost that tribal thinking, where, especially for individuals who may struggle in person socially anyway, now you have these platforms where you don't have to have those face-to-face conversations, but you can share your opinions, and pretty soon, and what unfortunately we see is an increase in loneliness the deeper somebody moves within what we call tribal thinking, which means if I have pretty strong ideas about something, whatever the topic may be, I may choose to just start talking to other people who view the world the same way I do.
Yeah.
And pretty soon...
block and mute all the others.
Exactly. All the blocks, all the mutes. And I never have to be challenged. My ideas never have to be challenged. And so over time, making a clear, articulate argument, articulating my stand on something, I don't even have to do that anymore. I can just get caught talking to other people who just have a very strong reaction to whatever the topic is that I do. And pretty soon I can just set aside those that don't agree with me. And unfortunately, I'm going to miss developing some really important emotional and relational skills if I start doing that. And I jotted this down because I thought this is an important statistic. One survey, this was actually done, it's called the BBC Loneliness Study. How's that for a study name? And this is a study of individuals aged 16 to 24. 40% stated that they feel lonely often or very often. And in this study, they did a correlation of the higher the number of incidents or that percentage or saying very often was in direct relationship to how much time that person spent online. And so the very thing that was supposed to make us feel more connected was having the opposite effect. And oftentimes, especially teenagers, when I have the opportunity, humble pleasure to talk with them, I always encourage them in this way. It's super easy for you to stay at your own home, not have face-to-face communication or contact or do events with somebody, because you can just record all of it through whatever platform you're using. Mm-hmm. But it's not the same thing as experiencing the event with that person. And we're seeing more and more of that. And it's increasing the amount of loneliness that people are reporting, which makes sense.
Yeah. When I was in college, I was studying marketing, and I can even remember sitting in class where we kind of opened up the topic of, in the 2000s, what did marketing look like? And so much of it was targeted towards 11, 12, 13 years old. And I think it still is today, but the thought is if you could grab those teens and kids at that age, they are going to be reliable on your brand for the next 10 years, or however long, depending on what the product was. And I just remember sitting there of like, it's obvious they're making money on this, but how we need to be able to think through this of JCPenney, The Gap, Apple, they're targeting our 11, 12-year-old, 13-year-old.
Yes.
Not in a horrible way, but they want to be influencers in their life.
Absolutely. Yes. It's so interesting because you're touching on an age. It's one of my favorite ages of individuals to work with. And this is pre-digital, all the technology, but it's so interesting because we have had so many studies on the impact of music, which John and I have talked a lot about music, so I know I've just entered an area of interest for him as well. In the area of music, 11, 12, 13 years of age, whatever music you listen to at those ages has a huge impact on your life, because that's when the music is so visceral at that age of, wow, I can remember the songs. I can remember what was going on in my life at that age because of the music. If I hear a song from that 2, 3, 4 year period of time, I'm taken back to that time. And so if you pair that, you're talking about advertising, if they happen to pair that song with whatever, there's a higher chance I'm going to buy that whatever, even if I don't need it. And so they are tapping into a really, really critical age of development, at that age of development, because it's not just, hey, what are my peers doing? But at that age, it becomes such a connection with the culture. And it's a personal connection, and it's a gravitation towards things that seem to reflect their emotion and seem to reflect who they view themselves. But the crazy part is we remember being that age, right?
Yeah.
That was hard because one day you wake up and you think you're this, and the next day you think you're this, and the next day you think you're this.
Sure.
It's a really tough time because you're almost trying on different personas at that age. And so, yes, I agree. It's absolutely a really critical time. And it's a great opportunity for the church. And that's why I love the opportunity we're doing this seminar, and I love the ministry, especially for that age, for those middle schoolers.
Yeah. I think a lot of people don't realize that these social media platforms have grown so much that, you know, YouTubers are making millions of dollars.
Yes.
Based off of sponsorships from YouTube, their own sponsorships.
Yes.
Their, you know, their own personal, you know, brand of clothing, you know.
Yes.
And they are labeled, I think especially on Instagram, they are labeled as influencers.
Yes.
Which is an incredible title for what they're doing. Taking pictures with the Dr. Pepper can. Dr. Pepper's probably paying them, you know.
Right. Yes. Yes. And I love that you bring that up, John, because it's so powerful. And I love that, especially on the platform of YouTube. It's not boring, everyday stuff that's going on these YouTube channels.
Oh.
It's not just, hey, watch me brush my teeth in the morning or watch me get ready for work. It's really talented individuals, high energy, charismatic, great on-camera presence that they have. And all of a sudden, this is being lofted up as the ideal. And there's nothing wrong with it. Those are some really amazing talents and gifts they have. But all of a sudden, these become the talents and gifts that are the most important. And I think that can have a really big influence on the upcoming generation, too, of these are the areas that I want to spend my time and attention. How do I look? How am I coming across on my own posts and those types of things, as opposed to, you know, some of the things I've shared earlier, which is the grueling, hard work of becoming a good citizen and a good adult.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty boring when compared to the family that's on YouTube that dances beautifully, and every week they put up great new videos. Right? It's not as fun. And so my heart always goes out to the parents because they have a bigger challenge than generations previously, because there's just so much of it out there.
Yeah.
And the kiddos' brains haven't changed. The 11, 12, 13-year-old brain has always been that brain for every generation. Mm-hmm. It's always seeking that more exciting, more emotional kind of release. They're all over the map, as we already talked about. But now they have this outlet that feeds that even more. And that's the challenge for parents is how do you counteract that? And one of the things that we'll be doing at the seminars, and it's kind of my role as part of this, is I love to write up practical little tips. And so as part of the seminars, I'm writing brochures to go along with it. And these will be little takeaways that people can use. And you don't have to have attended the seminar. I like to write them as their own little self-enclosed piece because I know not everybody can make it to the seminar. Yeah. I want to give it to the attendees that they can then share it with other people if they find that helpful. And so I've written up some exercises that just kind of embody and counteract all this social media, meaning you all figure out as a family where social media and screens and all of that's going to play a part. I'm not going to tell you how many hours or what you should do with that. But I like to add some activities that a family can add to their life just to enhance some of these skills we've been talking about, the resiliency, the boring delayed gratification. I've come up with some fun ways that they can add that to their family routine without a lot of work or extra effort. That's one of the areas I like to focus on is if it takes a lot of time and energy, who's going to do it? Starting with me.
Yeah.
I won't. I don't. I've met me. I know me. I won't do that. So I make them really simple. It's more about the intentionality. Hey, you're going to do this anyway. Hey, let me show you a couple little ways you can tweak this. And because there is some skills that your kiddos, well, we all need them, but definitely your children need to continue to have fostered even in this digital age, just to kind of make sure those things don't fall to the side. So that will be one of the things the parents can expect.
And Brenda, this is how we live in our world filled with technology is something that's always changing, right? Because on the horizon we have VR's going to become a huge thing.
The part of it that I think is amazing, and I am a fan of technology, I think it's amazing what it's done, is the preference part of it. And there's nothing wrong with that. We all have preferences. But the weakness part can come in when we only want to stay in our preferences. We don't grow, we're not challenged in our comfort zone, and we certainly are not going to allow other people who don't have the same preferences into our world. And that's where I think that can get, it's called consumeristic, I suppose, in the church. But that's where things can get a little bit dangerous. And that's the part that I would say to people, and parents especially with their children, is to continue to challenge that, what can be a really narrowed view of the world. Like, these are my preferences, and these are the only things I want. It has to be this, this, and this.
Yeah, those preferences become our expectations.
Yes, exactly. I would go so far as preferences can become idols.
Yeah.
Yeah, whoa, I just went there, and I meant to go there. I said it,
and
I'm going to stand by it.
We can project that onto other people, which is scary.
Exactly. Like, it has to be this way. And I think part of that dangerous part in that is what I've been alluding to earlier, which is I'm going to stay with people who think like I do. I can make it really easy to do so because I can just stay online.
Yeah.
Gather around the people who have, is very, very similar viewpoint. We can band together and we can call anybody that challenges us a troll. I mean, there's a name for it, right? And you can do all of those things, but you're not expanding your viewpoint. It's killing your empathy because it's killing your ability to view the world through the eyes of another person. And speaking of which, that's the part that we're going to lose too, especially if we just live in virtual reality. Here's a very important part that I love to share with people. God made us to need to have eye-to-eye contact. And I love it. I think that's one of the most beautiful things that our Lord knit into us. And I share it this way with people. As an infant, the parent, mom, dad, caregiver, whoever that is, we innately know, because God just sort of put that within us. Like when the little baby's upset, we pick them up, they're screaming, they're crying, they're doing all that, and we hold them before us. And it's my calm mind, if I'm the one that happens to be holding that little babe, it's my calmness that calms the infant. That's why we hold them out before us. It's my eye-to-eye contact. And as a counselor, once I realized the impact of that, of course, more importantly, I wanted to go to Scripture. And I spent a considerable amount of time, I was looking at that, at all the places in Scripture where it says, and Jesus saw him, and Jesus saw her. And I thought, how amazing is that? Because to say that once lets us know that Jesus had his sight. But over and over again means there's something important to this. And so between that and my study of the brain work, which I alluded to earlier, we have found out how important that is. And it's not just from the adult to the child, but adult to adult. We need that contact. We literally need this. And they've done studies, even secular studies, on the core needs of humans. And one of them they did was, and it's a powerful study, and it's a painful study to go back and read, and I'm so glad they don't feel a need to repeat it because this was a difficult study. They did studies at orphanages where they did not, intentionally and purposefully did not touch the infants.
Oh, man.
And the infants had failure to thrive. Later on, when they realized that wasn't very ethical of us to do that study, right, they've done it on primates. And there again, we can question the ethics of whether or not they should do it. I'm just glad that they had that data back then and nobody feels a need to repeat any of these studies. Yeah. But it was the same thing. And what they found was without that eye contact and without that touch, that's the one of our senses that we can die without. All the others, we're okay and we know that. But we can physically become ill without that touch, without that eye contact. God made us to need that.
Yeah.
And I find that extremely powerful. One of my favorite Christian a psychiatrist, psychologist. He's an MD as well. I love this quote. I brought this one along. From the moment you entered the world, your mind has been powerfully shaped by your environment, and the most important part of that environment is your interactions with other minds. I love that. I share that often. I'm surprised I still even have to read it. I practically have it memorized. I use it so much because I think it's so important that we understand that it's my mind connecting with your mind right now, John. That's the most important indicator of the growth, health of my mind and of your mind. Beyond information, beyond learning, beyond all those things we love, beyond technology, this is the most important thing that we have. And God designed us to need that. And that has not changed.
Yeah.
And that will never change. We are made in the image of a triune God. That says everything right there. We weren't made for community. We were made literally in community. So we can't set that aside. And all this technology can enhance that. It can make quick connections. I love texting. That's so simple, but still one of my favorite things. Like, how quickly can you distribute information? But it can't replace that my mind needs to sit across with intentionality and connect with your mind. And that's how I heal. That's how I grow. That's what the neurons in my brain need. And without it, nothing else can take its place. There is no substitute for that. And that's where I think this topic is so important, is because I think for some individuals it's become a substitute. And I love introverts. I think they get a hard time in our society because for whatever reason, choose to praise extroverts more. I'm an ambivert. I'm one of those in the middle. And for those of you that think I just made up a word, I did not make that word up. It simply means I'm somewhere in the middle between introversion and extroversion. But for the introverts, I encourage them as well. It doesn't have to be a lot of people because your social needs are different.
Yeah.
But please have one person who you are doing the ups and downs, ins and outs of life with. And that you meet with them and that you talk with them on a regular basis, face to face. It's important. It's needed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, Brenda, what I think I'm hearing you saying, it's not, we kind of talked about self-discipline a little bit in terms of careful who's influencing you and all that kind of stuff. But there's also a replacement for that, where we need to be replacing maybe some of those bad habits with more conversation time,
mm-hmm.
with more hugging, where you're having that connection with people.
Yes.
In a healthy way, and
yes.
not a more virtual way, I guess.
Right. And we've all seen those pictures, and we've all been a part of the pictures of being at that restaurant and everybody's got their phone out.
Yeah.
And we know that, and I'm guilty of it. I've done it. And that's one of the first places that things can change, is that intentional time where you're sitting down to a meal. Think how precious the meal time was for Jesus and his disciples. And think of the example of banquet and food and the breaking of bread. Jesus really meant that, which sounds funny because he meant everything he did. But that was such a powerful imagery all throughout Scripture. And I think that's one of the most important places that we can kind of push back against the digital age. And for those who are really comfortable doing the phone thing, it's going to be uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. And I always remind people it takes 3 to 6 months to start a new habit. Mm-hmm. And any new habit that's worth it, here we go, delayed gratification. There's that word again. I just threw it out there. The resiliency, all of those things are going to have to come into play because you're going to have to push through the discomfort of how easy that is to it's just sitting right there, just grab that phone again. Because maybe you haven't learned how to do face-to-face conversation, and maybe it's uncomfortable, and maybe it's easier to just pick an emoji as opposed to saying, hey, how do I feel about something? I don't even have to ask myself that emoji looks good, hit it, hit that GIF, hit whatever it is. And it's challenging to do it, especially if you don't have experience with it, but it's important and it's worth it to kind of push through. And I always say to people, if you're really uncomfortable, find somebody else that's maybe as uncomfortable and do it uncomfortable together. but it's really important. And so oftentimes we see people, we know they're talking to each other, but they're sitting next to each other texting as opposed to looking at one another. And that's okay. And it's okay to a limit, but if it's taken over and if you're uncomfortable having that face-to-face conversation, it may even be a starting point of connecting with one of the counselors here at King of Kings, because we're a great starting point for that. I have a lot of people I've worked with over the years that probably don't meet that definition, whatever you want to give it, of counseling. It's mentoring, and it's, in some cases, I truly believe I have individuals coming to see me because that's the only opportunity, and by the way, that breaks my heart, that they have to sit across from someone and know somebody's fully paying attention to them. Because I have never, will never, am never going to have my phone out when I'm meeting with someone.
Yeah.
That's breaking counseling 101 rules, by the way. That's a really bad thing to do, as you can imagine. That's bad. And I think that's really important. And I even challenge people in meetings, just having that phone out. And by the way, my phone is sitting here to the side, upside down. So I'm breaking my own rule here. Just having that conveys the sense of I'm not fully present. Mm-hmm. Because the truth of the matter is, more often than not, individuals forget, common mistake, to turn it all the way off. So that thing starts vibrating. And this is a wood table my phone's sitting on. So if mine was on vibrate, it would start rocking across the table and we'd be able to hear it. And so that conveys and can convey that I'm not fully here if I do that. Just having that phone even out. So I challenge people, there's a great place to start, is don't even have the phone out for that 30-minute conversation you're having with somebody. And yes, if you're not used to doing it, it's going to be really uncomfortable, really uncomfortable, but do it anyway, because it's going to take a while for it to become a habit. And pretty soon, which I love that, I love when I've reached the point that a habit, I call it, it's like cross that line. How's that for technical? It's not very technical, but I don't know how else to describe it. Where I've crossed that line that all of a sudden not doing the new thing has become uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
For me, I'm so slow at some of these things. For me, I'm more of that I said 3 to 6 months. I'm usually a 5-monther. I don't know why. I wish I was faster. I wish I could accelerate that. But usually it takes me close to about that 5-month where whatever this new habit is, I'm uncomfortable not doing the new thing. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden it becomes worth it.
So we're going to hit the pause button right here and continue this conversation on Waves next week. So sit tight. You won't want to miss next week's episode. We talk about how our brains process meaning and how people as a whole recognize their own significance to others. To learn more about Brenda's seminar coming up, you can do that at kingofkingsomaha.org/parenting. If you like the podcast, please subscribe because you won't want to miss out on what we've got coming up on Waves. Also, please leave us a review on iTunes. That helps us out tremendously and helps others find the podcast as well. For more information about King of Kings Church, who we are, what we believe, and additional content to feed your walk of faith, you can check us out at kingofkingsomaha.org. This has been Waves. Thanks so much for listening.